The first time Vivian Cove saw her, the world stood still. Not because the Duchess had a poetic soul, she most certainly did not, but because in the depths of that crumbling estate, behind mildew-stained curtains and rotting window frames, she saw a pair of eyes staring back at her from the attic like a ghost or a dream. Eyes that didn't belong to any servant nor any guest. Eyes that were much too alive for someone who looked so devastatingly forgotten. Vivian had come to Ashford Manor on business. That's what she told herself when her carriage crossed the muddy path into the once grand estate, escorted by a footman and followed by whispers that always trailed wherever she went. The Duchess is here, they had said. Vivian Cove, the widow with the fortune and the reputation to ruin any man or woman with a look.
She liked that.
The fear, the reverence, the power that wrapped around her like one of her fur-lined cloaks. But she hadn't come for pleasure. She had come to finalize a deal with Lord Edwin Ashford, a man as greasy and pitiful as his letters had suggested. She hadn't expected to stay long. And she most certainly hadn't expected to find her. The attic was locked. Of course it was. When Vivian asked, casually, who had been watching from above, Lady Constance Ashford's face, already pale with powdered arrogance, tightened just slightly. "Oh, that?" she said with a laugh like broken glass. "Just a silly maid. Half mad, I fear. We keep her away for her own good. Wouldn't want her disturbing our guests." But Vivian was not a guest. She was not a woman to be placated with lies wrapped in ribbons. She knew cruelty when she saw it. She had tasted it once, long ago, and recognized its flavor instantly. "Open the attic," she said coldly. Constance's smile faltered. "I assure you, it's quite unnecessary." Vivian's eyes sharpened. It wasn't a request. The key was slow to appear. When the door creaked open, dust spiraled into the air like smoke from an old fire, and the silence inside was so thick it nearly choked her. The room was small, barely more than a crawlspace, yet in its darkest corner, curled beneath a threadbare blanket and looking more fragile than anything Vivian had seen in years, was Alyssa Ashford. She didn't speak at first. She didn't move. She only stared, wide-eyed, like a deer unsure whether the approaching hand came with food or a blade. Her hair was a tangled mess of soft brown waves, her skin pale from lack of sunlight, her dress more rag than fabric. But her eyes, God, her eyes, were defiant, quietly burning. "What is your name?" Vivian asked, voice low. The girl hesitated. Her lips parted, then closed again. From behind her, Lady Constance hissed, "She doesn't need to answer. She's nothing. Some distant relation my late husband took pity on." Vivian didn't blink. "Then why is she hidden in an attic?" "She's ill. Unstable. She looks quite lucid to me." Vivian took a step closer. Alyssa flinched. "Don't touch her," Constance warned. "She bites." That made Vivian smile. She knelt slowly, until she was eye level with the girl. "Do you bite?" she asked softly. Alyssa's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from disuse. "Only if I'm cornered." A pause. Then, "My name is Alyssa." That was the moment something shifted. It was not love, no, not yet, but it was the echo of something dangerously close. By the next morning, Vivian had already made her decision. "You will come with me," she said, standing in the grand hall with her gloves pulled tight and her eyes colder than marble. Constance sputtered, enraged. "You can't simply take her. She's under my care." "No," Vivian cut. "She's under your control. There's a difference." Papers were signed. Money was exchanged. A threat, whispered in Constance's ear, ensured silence. And just like that, Alyssa Ashford left the only place she'd ever known. The journey to Cove Manor was long. Rain beat against the carriage windows, the woods outside a blur of shadows and secrets. Alyssa sat opposite the Duchess in stunned silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She didn't know where to look. At the unfamiliar world beyond the glass? At her own reflection? At the woman who'd rescued her for reasons still unknown? "Why did you take me?" she asked finally. Her voice still rasped like broken porcelain. Vivian didn't look at her. "Because you didn't belong in a cage." You don't even know me.
No.
But I know her. And if she hated you that much, you must be worth something. Alyssa didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't used to being looked at.
Not really.
And Vivian. Vivian looked like she saw everything. Cove Manor was vast, older than time and twice as intimidating. Alyssa trembled as she stepped inside. But Vivian didn't coddle. She merely said, "You'll be given your own chamber. You'll eat what you wish, sleep when you wish. If anyone touches you without consent, tell me." A pause. "And stay out of the West Wing. For now." Alyssa blinked. "Why?" Vivian turned, one brow raised. "Because I said so." That night, Alyssa lay awake in the softest bed she'd ever touched, heart pounding in a rhythm she didn't recognize. Not fear. Not yet safety. But something in between. Something that kept bringing her mind back to the woman with storm-colored eyes and the voice like velvet steel. She had been hidden, buried, forgotten. But now she was seen. And there was no going back. The silence of Cove Manor was different from the silence of the attic. It was vast, heavy, dignified. Not the silence of imprisonment, but of power. Alyssa felt it in her bones from the moment she awoke that first morning. The sheets beneath her were soft enough to sink into, the air scented faintly with lavender and something darker, muskier, like old wood and secrets. For a moment, she thought she might still be dreaming. But when she sat up and touched the intricate embroidery on the pillow, when she saw her reflection in the tall mirror, pale skin, haunted eyes, a girl reborn, she knew it was real. She was no longer in the attic. And yet, she didn't feel free. The room was beautiful but unfamiliar, the bed too large, the silence too complete. She didn't know how to be in this world. She didn't know how to be someone at all. Her door creaked open. A maid entered without looking her in the eye. "The Duchess requests your presence in the conservatory." Alyssa nodded mutely and dressed with trembling fingers, unsure whether to wear the modest gray dress folded at the end of the bed or the deep blue one that looked far too fine for someone like her. She chose the gray. The corridors of Cove Manor were labyrinthine. Every corner seemed to whisper with history. Portraits of long-dead nobility stared down at her as she walked, their gazes heavy with judgment. But when she stepped into the conservatory, all of that faded. Sunlight poured through the glass ceiling. Vines curled along the iron framework. In the center, surrounded by orchids and shadows, stood Vivian. She wore black again, of course. It suited her, commanding, elegant, like morning personified. She didn't turn when Alyssa entered, but she spoke. "You're up later than I expected." Alyssa hesitated. "I didn't sleep well." "You're safe now." "Am I?" That made Vivian glance back, her expression unreadable. "No one here will lock you in a room. You have my word." Alyssa nodded, but the words didn't quite settle. She stepped closer, drawn despite herself. "Why do you have a West Wing if I'm not allowed in it?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. "You've been here less than a day, and you're already breaking rules?" "You didn't answer the question." "Because some things in this house are not meant to be disturbed. Like me?" The words escaped before Alyssa could stop them. A flash of something passed through Vivian's eyes, surprise, maybe, or something deeper. But she didn't respond. Instead, she plucked a leaf from a nearby fern and examined it like it held the answer to something she didn't want to say aloud. "Did you wish to leave?" Alyssa swallowed. "No." "Then stop looking for reasons to run." The conversation ended there, but the tension didn't. Alyssa felt it like static in the air. Every glance from Vivian, every silence, filled with words unsaid. That afternoon, she explored the manor. She passed grand parlors and vast libraries, marble staircases, and shadowed hallways. The servants treated her with the cautious politeness reserved for someone under the Duchess's protection, but not quite part of her world. She didn't belong here.
Not yet.
Maybe not ever. But when she caught sight of herself in one of the gilded mirrors, she noticed something strange. She didn't look like a prisoner anymore. That night, she wandered into the library. The room was dark except for a fire glowing low in the hearth. Shelves towered around her, filled with books whose titles she couldn't pronounce. She reached for one at random and opened it, only to feel a presence behind her. Vivian's voice was soft. "You read Latin?" Alyssa turned quickly.
No.
"I just wanted to touch something that wasn't velvet or gold for a change." Vivian smirked and stepped closer. "Everything in this house intimidates you." "Not everything." Their eyes met. The silence between them pulsed. Vivian tilted her head. "You're braver than you look. Or more broken. Those are not mutually exclusive."
A pause.
"What did she tell you? About me?" Vivian's expression cooled. "She said you were mad, that you couldn't be trusted, that you belonged in shadows." Alyssa's voice dropped. Was she wrong? No, Vivian moved past her, trailing fingers across the spines of books as she walked. But not for the reasons she thinks. Alyssa wanted to ask more, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Vivian moved, like a woman constantly balancing between grace and danger. Or maybe it was fear of hearing too much, too soon. She returned to her chamber with a heart that wouldn't slow. That night, she dreamed of hands unlocking doors, of whispers behind velvet curtains, of a woman in black with eyes like storms. Days passed. Alyssa began to settle, in small ways. She learned the names of the maids. She walked the grounds. She found a favorite window seat where the sun hit just right. But Vivian remained elusive. She appeared suddenly and disappeared just as fast, always wrapped in secrets. Alyssa watched her like one might watch fire. Too close and she might get burned. Yet she kept stepping closer. One evening, she found a music room. The piano sat untouched, but the moment she laid her fingers on it, it responded like an old friend. She played a simple melody, half remembered from childhood. When the final note faded, she looked up, and Vivian was in the doorway. Their eyes met across the room. Neither spoke, but something passed between them, thick and electric. Alyssa stood slowly. "Why do you keep watching me?" Vivian stepped inside. "Because you don't know who you are yet. And I find that fascinating." "And who are you?" "A woman who's made peace with being feared." Alyssa's voice was barely audible. "I'm not afraid of you." Vivian took one step closer. "Then you're either very brave or very foolish." Alyssa didn't move. "Or maybe I see something in you no one else does." That stopped Vivian cold. For a breathless second, neither moved. Then the Duchess turned sharply and vanished into the hall, leaving Alyssa alone with the echo of her own words and the realization that something dangerous was beginning. The West Wing called to her like a siren. Alyssa tried not to look at it when she passed the darkened hallway, but it was impossible to ignore. It loomed like a secret written into the very bones of the house. And though Vivian had told her to stay away, she hadn't explained why. That made it worse. Prohibition, after all, was a kind of invitation. Especially when it came from a woman like the Duchess, who ruled over silence and shadow as if they belonged to her. Alyssa lasted 3 more days. 3 days of wandering halls, of catching fleeting glimpses of Vivian in candlelight, reading by the fireplace, walking through the garden with her coat trailing behind her like smoke, speaking in low tones to a man who always vanished when Alyssa approached. 3 days of unanswered questions and dreams she couldn't shake. On the 4th evening, curiosity won. She waited until the manor was asleep, or as close to asleep as such a place could be. Cloaked in one of the maid's spare shawls, she crept past the servants' wing and down the main corridor, the West Wing looming ahead like a throat about to swallow her whole. The door was not locked. That alone made her pause. Why would Vivian warn her away from a wing she hadn't bothered to seal? Or, had she known this would happen, had she counted on Alyssa's disobedience, her hunger to uncover what lay beneath the surface of this house and the woman who ruled it? She stepped through the threshold. The air was colder, the silence denser. The corridor stretched endlessly, lined with shuttered windows and paintings that had been covered with sheets. Dust clung to every surface. It felt abandoned, not haunted, exactly, but grieving. Alyssa's fingers brushed the edge of a door, and she pushed it open. Inside, the room was smaller than expected. A study, perhaps, or something more intimate. Love what you've seen so far and want to help me keep creating these awesome stories on this channel? Then subscribe and hit the bell. Your subscription supports the channel and makes sure you get more exciting stories. The walls were lined with books, but unlike the grand library, these were worn, personal. A desk stood near the window, and above it, a painting half covered with a velvet cloth. She pulled it back. Her breath caught. It was a portrait of a woman. Not Vivian, but similar enough to cause a jolt of recognition. The woman had darker skin, softer eyes, but the same proud tilt of the chin, the same elegant posture. She wore a deep burgundy gown and looked happy, alive. Alyssa didn't hear the door creak behind her. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were close enough for her to feel them. I told you not to come here. Vivian's voice was not angry, not cold, but there was something in it, something raw, something like pain barely restrained. Alyssa turned slowly. Who is she? Vivian didn't move from the doorway. Her silhouette was rigid, controlled. Her name was Camille. Was. A pause. She died 5 years ago. And she was my wife. The words hung heavy in the air. Alyssa's heart stuttered. Why didn't you tell me? Why would I? Because you brought me here. Because you look at me like you're afraid of what I make you feel. Vivian stepped into the room, her eyes unreadable. You think you frighten me? No, Alyssa whispered. I think I remind you that you can still feel it all. Silence stretched between them, thick and trembling. Then Vivian turned away, staring out the window. She was the only one who ever truly saw me. She tamed me in a way no one else ever could. And when she died, part of me did too. And the other part? The other part learned to survive. Alone? Always. Alyssa stepped closer. You don't have to be. Vivian looked at her then, sharply. Don't make promises you can't keep. And don't shut out the one person who wants to understand you. For a moment, Vivian looked like she might speak, might finally let something slip. But instead, she moved past Alyssa without another word, her coat brushing the girl's arm like a warning. When the door closed behind her, Alyssa remained in the room, breathless. She didn't know what scared her more, that Vivian had once loved deeply or that she might again. The days that followed were strained. Vivian avoided her. Dinners were quiet. The few stolen glances they shared were tense, electric, filled with things unspoken. Alyssa wandered through the estate like a ghost, carrying the weight of that portrait, that confession. And yet, she didn't regret it, because now she understood. Vivian wasn't cruel, she was wounded, armored. Alyssa knew what that felt like. One evening, as a storm raged outside and lightning cast violent shadows through the manor, Alyssa found herself back in the conservatory. She stood among the vines and the orchids, watching the sky fracture. Behind her, she sensed movement. She didn't turn. I thought you weren't speaking to me. Vivian's voice was quieter than usual. I thought I didn't owe you anything. You don't. Then why do I feel like I do? Alyssa faced her. The Duchess looked tired, the stormlight making her seem almost human. I don't want to be Camille, Alyssa said. Good. But I want to be something to you. Vivian closed the distance between them slowly, deliberately, like a predator unsure if it was safe to pounce. You already are. Then stop running from it. The silence between them pulsed again. And this time, Vivian didn't turn away. She lifted a hand and brushed a damp strand of hair from Alyssa's cheek. Her fingers lingered. Alyssa's breath caught. Vivian's gaze dropped to her lips, but only for a moment. Not yet, she said, voice trembling. Why? Because once I start, I won't be able to stop. And then, she vanished into the storm. Alyssa stood alone, heart pounding, knowing without doubt, she was falling. The invitation arrived on parchment the color of bone, embossed with gold so thick it shimmered like molten sunlight. Alyssa found it on the breakfast table beside her tea, untouched by the Duchess, who stood at the window, her posture perfect, her gaze locked on something distant. There's to be a masquerade, Vivian said without turning. Here? Alyssa asked, her voice still soft with sleep. At Cove Manor?
Yes.
It's tradition. Once a year, the house opens its doors to the vultures. The nobility, you mean? Vivian smirked. Is there a difference? Alyssa's fingers brushed the edge of the card. And I'm to attend? You'll be my guest. Is that what I am? That made Vivian turn. Her eyes were darker than usual, unreadable. That's what they'll believe. And what should I believe? Vivian didn't answer. She never did when the questions got too close. But that night, a dress appeared in Alyssa's chamber. Midnight blue, edged in silver, with a mask of velvet and lace. It was unlike anything she had ever touched, soft, luxurious, utterly inappropriate for the girl who once lived in dust and shadows. She stared at it like it might vanish. But when she put it on, something changed. Her posture straightened. Her eyes sharpened. She looked in the mirror and did not see the girl from the attic. She saw a woman who might one day be dangerous. The ballroom of Cove Manor glowed with candlelight and music. Chandeliers hung like frozen constellations above heads adorned with jewels and masks, and laughter echoed off marble and mirrored glass. Alyssa stepped in beside Vivian, who wore black once more, her mask gilded and sharp like a blade disguised as beauty. Conversations ceased when they entered. Heads turned. Whispers ignited like sparks in dry grass. Who is she? Is that the Ashford girl? Impossible. She was just a rumor. Vivian's voice was calm as she offered her arm. They'll devour you if you let them. I'm not afraid, Alyssa said, lifting her chin.
Good.
Then you're learning. They moved like shadows through the crowd. Nobles bowed. Ladies curtsied. Gentlemen stared too long. Alyssa kept her spine straight. Every step a performance. But the moment she left Vivian's side to take a breath alone near the terrace, someone else approached. You're the Duchess's new charity case, aren't you? The voice was male, smooth with poison. Alyssa turned to find a man in emerald silk, his mask feathered, his eyes smug. I'm her guest, she replied. Are you? He stepped closer. Or are you just a replacement? Her breath caught. For Camille, he added. We all remember her. No one's filled that space since. Alyssa's hand clenched. You speak so freely for a man hiding behind a mask. Isn't that what you're doing? He asked with a sneer. Pretending to be one of us? Playing dress-up? A hand slid between them. Vivian. Her presence cut the air like lightning. Step away from her. Vivian. The man laughed, trying to recover. I meant no offense. You meant exactly what you said. Her voice was low, lethal. Now leave, before I make your name unspoken in every corner of this country. He paled and vanished into the crowd. Vivian turned to Alyssa, her voice now softer. Are you hurt? Only my pride.
Good.
Pride grows back. Alyssa looked up at her, heart pounding. But some things don't. Vivian hesitated. For once, she seemed unsure. Come with me. She led Alyssa from the ballroom, through a side corridor and into a smaller parlor, where the music was just a murmur in the walls. You shouldn't have left my side, Vivian said, not unkindly. I didn't know I was yours to stay beside. You're not. But I find myself forgetting that. Alyssa stepped closer. Why? Because you look at me like I'm human. And I haven't been that in a long time. You are, Alyssa whispered. To me you are. Vivian's hand lifted, trembling slightly, and traced the edge of Alyssa's mask. Her fingers lingered at her jaw. You've changed, she murmured. You're not the girl I found in that attic.
No.
But I'm still trying to become someone. You already are. Their breaths tangled. Vivian leaned in, close enough to kiss. But again she stopped. Her lips hovered just beside Alyssa's cheek, a breath away from something irreversible. Not yet, she said, for the second time. But this time, it sounded more like a promise than a warning. The rest of the night blurred. Alyssa returned to the ballroom with Vivian beside her, and though no more words passed between them, everything had changed. The stares intensified. The whispers sharpened. And by dawn, Alyssa understood something vital. She was no longer invisible. She had become a threat. The letter arrived at dawn, sealed in crimson wax and marked with the unmistakable crest of the Ashford family. Alyssa recognized it the moment she saw it on the silver tray outside her door, her breath catching in her throat like it had done 100 times before in that attic, whenever Constance had summoned her for punishment or silence. She stared at it without touching. The hallway was quiet, the house still asleep, but the paper pulsed with threat. When she finally unsealed it, her fingers trembling slightly, she read each word slowly, as if they might vanish if she blinked too hard. You think yourself safe, little orphan. But I do not forget, nor forgive. The Duchess cannot protect you from everything. It wasn't signed. It didn't have to be. Alyssa folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside her bed, forcing her hands to be still. She would not give Constance the satisfaction of running.
Not now.
Not when she'd begun to feel her own skin for the first time. She dressed in silence and went to breakfast, where Vivian sat at the head of the long table, already halfway through her tea. You're early, the Duchess said without looking up. Couldn't sleep, Alyssa answered, taking her seat. Something wrong? No, a lie. But Vivian didn't press. She never did. That day passed with a strange weight pressing on Alyssa's chest. She couldn't shake the sense that something was coming, something she wasn't ready for. And when evening fell, her fear was proven right. The butler approached Vivian during supper. A guest, my lady. Uninvited. But insistent. Vivian didn't so much as blink. Who? Lady Constance Ashford. Alyssa froze. Her spoon slipped into her bowl unnoticed. Vivian's fingers curled around the stem of her wine glass, slow and deliberate. Show her into the west parlor. And tell her she has 10 minutes. Alyssa rose. I'll go with you. No, the word cracked like thunder. Then, gentler, stay here. But Alyssa couldn't. Minutes later, she was in the corridor, her steps soundless as she followed at a distance, heart in her throat. She stopped just before the parlor and listened. Constance's voice was unmistakable, sharp, poised, venomous. So this is where she's been. Hiding behind your skirts, like a coward. She's not hiding, Vivian replied calmly. She's healing. She's mine. She was never yours. A bitter laugh. Do you think they'll accept her? Once they learn where she came from? What she's done? What I could make them believe she's done? A pause. Then Vivian's voice, ice cold. Try. What will you do? Throw your money at me? Threaten me? No, another pause. I will destroy you. And I'll enjoy it. Constance hissed something Alyssa couldn't hear. A moment later, the door flung open and the woman stormed out, nearly colliding with Alyssa in the hall. They locked eyes. And for the first time, Constance looked genuinely startled. So the little rat grew teeth. Alyssa stepped forward, her voice steady. I'm not yours. Not anymore. You think she loves you? Constance spat. She doesn't love anyone. She'll keep you as long as you're useful. Then you'll be back in the dirt where you belong. She stalked away. Vivian appeared in the doorway behind her, face unreadable. You shouldn't have come, she said to Alyssa. I had to. Why? Because I needed to know you'd choose me. Something flickered across Vivian's expression, brief, vulnerable. I already did. The next morning, Alyssa's presence at Cove Manor was no longer a quiet secret. The papers whispered of it. The guests who had attended the masquerade spread stories. Who was the girl in the Duchess's shadow? Why did Vivian Cove look at her like that? What hold did she have over her? Alyssa tried to ignore it. But whispers had a way of turning into storms. And when a second letter arrived, and signed again, this time not with threats, but details, she began to understand that Constance had begun a new kind of attack. Alyssa Ashford, born illegitimately, mother unknown, education incomplete, prone to hysteria, formerly confined for violent behavior. None of it was true, not in the way it was written. But truth didn't matter to society.
Perception did.
That night, she found Vivian in the study, staring at the fire with a glass of brandy in her hand. "You read it," Alyssa said. "Of course I did." "And?" Vivian looked at her. "I have survived worse scandals. But will you survive this one with me beside you?" "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you'll run when it gets worse." Alyssa crossed the room slowly, took the glass from Vivian's hand, and set it aside. "I lived in an attic for 6 years. I've already survived worse than this." A beat passed. Then another. Vivian rose, slowly. "You don't understand what it means to stand beside me." "Then show me." She reached for Vivian's hand, and this time, the Duchess didn't pull away. Instead, she turned it over and laced their fingers together, palm to palm, warm and trembling. "If you stay," Vivian whispered, "you'll never be invisible again. You'll be hunted,
Desired. Watched.
judged. But I'll be seen." "Yes." "Then I'll stay." And in that moment, Vivian leaned in, not to kiss her, not yet, but to rest her forehead against Alyssa's, eyes closed, breath shared, and said nothing. Because some things didn't need to be spoken to be real. It began with an invitation, written in calligraphy as sharp as a knife's edge. Lord Sebastian Holloway, an influential figure in Parliament and an old enemy wrapped in silk and smiles, was hosting a diplomatic gathering at his estate, and Vivian's presence was requested. Expected. Demanded almost. The invitation didn't surprise her. The postscript did. "You may bring your guest. We are all eager to meet the girl who has captured your attention." Alyssa read the note twice, then looked up at Vivian across the breakfast table. "He's mocking you." "Of course he is," Vivian said, slicing into her toast like it was Holloway's throat. "He's inviting me into the lion's mouth and offering you as bait." "Then we won't go."
No.
"We will."
Why?
"Because I don't hide." Her voice was calm, but beneath the surface, Alyssa felt the tremor of something else. Defiance, yes, but also fear, the kind one never admitted aloud. Preparations began the same afternoon. The Holloway estate was a place of grandeur and venom, where politics and pleasure coiled together like snakes. The gathering would be large, attended by nobility, diplomats, and a press with long memories and longer knives. The idea of entering that arena made Alyssa's stomach twist. But she didn't flinch. Not when Vivian chose a dark crimson gown for her, one that clung to her waist and bared her shoulders like a statement. Not when she fastened the sapphire pendant around Alyssa's neck, fingers lingering at her collarbone a beat too long. Not when she whispered, "You'll be magnificent, and they'll hate that." The carriage ride was silent. Outside, rain streaked the glass like silver claws. Inside, Vivian's hand hovered inches from Alyssa's, never touching, always near. It was a metaphor for them both. Holloway's estate glowed like a jewel dipped in oil. The ballroom was a sea of satin, laughter, and false warmth. Eyes turned the moment they entered. Vivian was a vision in black, her chin high, her presence undeniable. Alyssa at her side was a revelation. Young, composed, devastatingly out of place, and yet untouchable. The murmurs began instantly. She brought her? Bold, even for Vivian. What is she playing at? They danced around the room like ice and flame. Vivian kept her hand at Alyssa's back, possessive, protective, and far too gentle for the rumors that surrounded her. But Alyssa noticed everything. The looks, the mocking smiles, the way Holloway approached, glass in hand, voice dripping with charm. "Duchess, you honor us." "I always enjoy watching powerful men pretend they still matter," Vivian replied coolly. "And this must be," he turned to Alyssa, "the infamous guest, the girl with the attic past and the Duchess's present attention. Tell me, is it beauty or pity that keeps you in her favor?" Alyssa didn't blink. "Neither," she said. "It's something you'll never understand, loyalty." Vivian almost smiled. Almost. Holloway, amused and irritated, leaned in slightly. "Just be careful, darling. The higher you rise beside her, the further you'll fall when she tires of the view." "You mistake her for yourself," Vivian said, her voice like velvet sheathing steel. "I don't collect. I protect. He bowed with a smirk and vanished into the crowd, but the tension remained. Are you all right? Vivian asked under her breath. I'm learning, Alyssa replied. Quickly. The rest of the evening passed like a test neither of them agreed to take. Alyssa felt herself walking a tightrope, balancing between admiration and scandal. Every word she spoke was dissected. Every glance from Vivian lit fires she couldn't put out. But the real storm came later. They returned to Cove Manor after midnight, the rain heavier now, drumming on the carriage like war drums. As soon as the doors closed behind them, Vivian turned. You didn't have to answer him like that. Would you rather I stayed silent? I'd rather you weren't in their sights at all. It's too late for that. I know. She exhaled, frustration curling in her shoulders. You just care. Silence. Then, yes. Alyssa stepped forward. Then stop pretending you don't. If I stop pretending, I'll have to feel it. All of it. And is that so terrible? It is when you've forgotten how. Alyssa reached for her hand, and this time Vivian let her take it. They stood in the entry hall, soaked in silence and moonlight. What are you afraid of? Alyssa whispered. Vivian's eyes burned. Of loving someone I can't keep safe. Then let me protect you too. You already do. And that terrifies me more. The moment shattered the last of the walls between them, not in declarations, not in touches, but in breath, in nearness, in vulnerability exposed like flesh. But just as the tension built to the brink, a knock at the door sliced through it like a blade. A servant appeared, pale and shaken. There's a man at the gate. He says he has information. About Lady Constance. Vivian's expression hardened. Alyssa turned to her. Do we trust him?
No.
But we listen. They moved as one. Into the night. Into danger. Into whatever truth waited beyond the gate. Together. The man at the gate was soaked to the bone, his clothes clinging to him like second skin, his eyes darting nervously beneath the brim of his hat. He looked like someone who lived in the shadows of greater men, someone who made a living not by strength, but by what he overheard. Vivian didn't speak at first. She watched him like a hawk, her gloved hands folded behind her back, Alyssa beside her, silent but alert. You said you had information, Vivian finally said, voice sharp enough to draw blood. The man swallowed. About Lady Constance. She's been meeting with someone. A man from the continent, French, I think. Name's Leclerc. He's dangerous. He deals in secrets. And leverage. She's offered him something. Or rather, someone. Who? Vivian asked, though she already knew the answer. The man looked directly at Alyssa. Her. The air shifted. Alyssa didn't move, didn't speak, but her fingers curled tightly at her sides. Vivian stepped forward. Why tell me this? Because Leclerc doesn't play fair. And because Constance offered me money to keep quiet, but your money's better. And your life? She asked softly. Is that also for sale? He went pale. Vivian took the information, paid him in silence, and watched as he fled into the night. The moment he disappeared through the trees, she turned and walked swiftly back toward the manor. Alyssa followed, her voice low. What does he mean, offered me? Constance doesn't care how she wins, Alyssa. She only cares that you lose. Then what do we do? Vivian stopped just outside the doors, rain dripping from her lashes. We do what I've always done. We end it. What followed wasn't chaos. It was calculation. Vivian moved like a woman stepping into a version of herself she hadn't worn in years. She summoned names Alyssa had never heard, issued orders that sent staff scurrying. Letters were written. Connections were activated. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't speak of mercy. She was cold and brilliant and terrifying. Alyssa watched from the shadows of the study as Vivian paced, her voice low and controlled as she dictated a message to someone only referred to as Valentine. When she finally finished, she turned to find Alyssa watching her. You're afraid of me now, Vivian said, not as a question but as a fact. No, Alyssa replied. But I see you more clearly than before. And I'm not turning away. Vivian's expression fractured, just slightly. You should. You keep saying that. And yet you keep pulling me closer. Because I can't help it. Then stop trying to. The air between them snapped tight. Vivian crossed the room, slow and deliberate, until they stood only inches apart. You don't understand what I've done for women like you to survive. Then show me. Vivian's hand came to rest against her cheek, thumb brushing her skin like a memory she hadn't yet lived. I will, she whispered, but not tonight. Tonight, I do what must be done. She left at dusk. Alyssa watched from the tower window as Vivian rode alone into the forest. No escort, no warning. Just her and the storm. Hours passed. Alyssa waited, nerves fraying like thread. The rain never stopped. Then, just before dawn, Vivian returned, her cloak soaked, her hair undone, her eyes darker than night. Alyssa rushed to meet her in the entryway. You're hurt. Not mine, Vivian said, pulling off her gloves. Whose? Leclerc's. She walked past Alyssa, but stopped before ascending the stairs. He won't be bothering you again. Alyssa followed her to the sitting room, where a fire had been lit. Vivian sank into the armchair, suddenly looking older. I made a promise, she said quietly, that I'd protect you, no matter what it cost me. And what did it cost you tonight? The last piece of my soul I hadn't already bartered away. Don't say that. It's true. No, it isn't. Alyssa knelt before her, taking her hands. You are not what she tried to make you believe. You are not the monster they paint you to be. And what am I to you? You are the first person who ever saw me. And I see you too. All of you. Even the parts you hate. Vivian's fingers tightened around hers. You're too young to speak like that. And you're too used to silence. The moment bloomed between them, fragile, dangerous, unbearably intimate. This time, when Vivian leaned in, she didn't stop. Her lips met Alyssa's like a secret finally spoken. The kiss wasn't soft. It was desperate. Tense. Like two people who had waited too long and couldn't afford to wait any longer. Alyssa clutched at Vivian's shoulders, feeling the shudder in her body. The surrender she had denied for weeks. When they broke apart, neither of them spoke. There was only breath. And then, Vivian's voice low, shaking. If anything happens to you, nothing will. I've made enemies, Alyssa. Powerful ones. Then let me be your ally. That's not what I want from you. Then tell me what you want. Vivian's eyes searched hers, and for the first time, there was no mask, no distance. I want you to stay. Then I will. Outside, the storm began to fade. But inside the manor, a new kind of fire had been lit, one that neither of them could control. The kiss lingered long after their lips parted, as though the taste of it had soaked into the very air of Cove Manor. Neither of them spoke about it the next morning. Vivian appeared at breakfast dressed in her usual black, composed as always, her eyes unreadable. Alyssa sat across from her, heart still humming with the memory, but hands steady. Something between them had changed, undeniably, irrevocably, but neither of them dared name it. Naming it would make it fragile. Naming it would make it real. Vivian sipped her tea, without looking up. There will be consequences, she said softly. For what happened to Leclerc? For what I did to protect you. And for what I let happen last night. Alyssa swallowed. Are you sorry? No, a pause. But I'm afraid. For both of us. Alyssa stood and walked to the window, the pale morning light casting her in silver. Then teach me how not to be afraid. Or let me fight beside you. You don't know what that means. Then show me. Vivian didn't respond. But that afternoon, Alyssa received a visitor. An older woman named Celia, sharp-eyed and quiet, arrived under the guise of being a lady's companion. She was anything but. She carried blades hidden in her corset and spoke 6 languages, 3 of which she used only when she needed someone dead or disappeared. She trained Alyssa without apology. No condescension. No kindness. Only survival. For 3 days, Alyssa learned how to read a room, how to move without being followed, how to hear things that were never said aloud. At night, Her body ached, but her heart burned. Vivian didn't visit her training sessions, but she knew. And every time their eyes met across a room, something wordless passed between them. Gratitude, admiration, want. But peace doesn't last in stories like theirs. On the fourth night, the security around Cove Manor was breached. Just once. A knife was found embedded in Alyssa's door, buried to the hilt in the wood. Attached to it, a ribbon, blood red, unmistakable. Vivian found her before the staff did. She stood in the doorway, staring at the blade, fury radiating from her like heat.
Constance, she said.
She wants to provoke you, Alyssa murmured. She wants you to lose control. She's going to get what she wants. No, Alyssa turned to her. She wants to ruin you. That's the real goal. If she can't have me, she'll burn everything you love just to watch you bleed. Vivian's face twisted. She already took enough from me. Then don't let her take your name, your power, your mind. Silence pulsed between them. Then Vivian's voice, low and raw. You don't understand. I'd burn the world before I let anyone hurt you again. I know. Alyssa stepped closer. That's why I have to act first. What are you saying? I'm saying, I need to go to her. Absolutely not. Vivian, no. That's not bravery. That's madness. She wants me, not you. She's not aiming at your title or your fortune anymore. She wants me back in her hands, or broken, or both. And you think walking into her den will change that?
No.
I think it will end it. Vivian's hands were shaking. I won't let you. You can't stop me. You taught me how to survive. Now let me use it. Alyssa, if I don't do this, she'll keep coming. She'll never stop. Vivian turned away, her shoulders rigid, every part of her carved in restraint. I love you. The words dropped like stones in still water. Alyssa froze. Say it again. Vivian turned back, her voice breaking. I love you.
I didn't want to. I tried not to.
But I do. Alyssa reached for her face, cupping her cheek. Then trust me. I can't lose you. Then don't let me go alone. The plan was set by morning. Alyssa would approach Constance under the guise of surrender, wearing a message encoded in gesture, in eye contact, in movement, things only Vivian and her few trusted spies would recognize. The confrontation would happen in neutral territory, the winter garden of the old opera house, a place Constance frequented when pretending to be refined. Alyssa walked in alone, dressed in soft gray, her hair pinned back, no makeup, no jewelry. She was the girl from the attic again by design. Constance was already waiting, smug, seated beside a dead fountain filled with dry roses. How obedient, she said, sipping her tea. You came. I want this to end. Do you? Constance rose slowly. Or have you come to beg for her life? I'm not begging. I'm offering. What could you possibly offer me now? My silence. My distance. My name. Constance laughed, sharp and cruel. I already took those from you, but she gave them back. And you hate that, don't you? Constance's smile faded. Do you think love makes you powerful? No, Alyssa said, stepping forward. But it makes me impossible to break. Behind her, hidden in the glass shadows, Vivian watched. Armed. Waiting. Constance reached for Alyssa's arm. Too fast. A signal was triggered. In less than a breath, guards closed in from the side entrances. Vivian emerged from the far wing, her eyes on fire. Touch her again, she said, and I'll make your death last days. Constance paled. You think this is over?
It already is.
The arrest happened swiftly. The charges, espionage, conspiracy, blackmail, were already prepared. Constance would be ruined, silenced, forgotten. But the moment Vivian pulled Alyssa into her arms, none of that mattered. You risked everything, Vivian whispered against her hair. For you, Alyssa murmured. Always for you. The morning after Constance's arrest, the silence in Cove Manor was thicker than the heaviest storm. It wasn't peace. It was anticipation. The kind that came just before a battle you knew was inevitable. Vivian sat in the drawing room, papers strewn before her like fallen soldiers. Headlines, statements, thinly veiled accusations dressed as societal concern. The Duchess and her pet. A forgotten girl inherits a fortune. And a woman. What happened in the West Wing? They hadn't even waited 24 hours. Alyssa entered without knocking. Her hair was still damp from the bath, her face bare, her shoulders squared. "They're calling me names," she said, holding one of the papers. "They're calling me yours." Vivian didn't look up. "You are." Alyssa crossed the room and sat across from her. "Then why haven't you said so?" Vivian's fingers curled around the edge of the newspaper. "Because the more I claim you, the more they'll hate you. And the less you do, the more they'll doubt you." A long silence. Then, "So let them doubt," Vivian murmured. "Let them speculate and gossip and lie. But they'll never know what you are to me." "And what am I?" Vivian looked at her, something fragile flickering in her eyes. "Everything." It should have been enough. But the world didn't care about quiet confessions. It demanded blood. Over the next week, the invitations stopped. The letters from Parliament grew cold. Investments were withdrawn. Vivian's name, once revered, feared, untouchable, was now a whisper people said with narrowed eyes. And through it all, Alyssa stayed. She read every cruel article. She stood beside Vivian at every appearance. She endured the stares, the laughter, the deliberate silence. But the worst came at the charity auction, an event Vivian had funded for years. It was supposed to be routine, elegant, safe. But the moment they arrived, Alyssa in deep emerald, Vivian in black lace, the room froze. No one approached them. No one greeted them. And when Vivian placed her bid on a rare manuscript, the host deliberately ignored it. Alyssa touched her arm. "Let's leave." "No, they're humiliating you." "Then let them try." A man stepped up to the stage, smiling too wide. And now a final item. A relic from the Ashford estate. A portrait recovered recently. Unknown artist. Unwanted subject. The canvas was unveiled. Alyssa froze. It was her. The painting from the attic.
Dirty.
Diminished. Afraid. The room murmured. Some laughed. Someone whispered, "Poetic, isn't it?" The Duchess's little pet on display again. Vivian stood so quickly her chair fell backward. The room went silent. "Remove it," she said. "It's for sale, my lady," the host said. "Then I'm buying it." "The starting bid is 500. I said I'm buying it." "That's not how this works." "Then this is how it ends." Vivian strode forward, took the painting off the easel, and turned to the crowd. "Let me be clear," she said, her voice steady, dangerous. "You may mock me. You may withdraw your favors, your invitations, your money. But you do not touch her. Not with your words, not with your games. She is mine. Not because I claimed her, but because she saved me." She tore the painting in half, clean down the center. The silence that followed was a wound in the air. She left the room, Alyssa at her side, fingers laced tightly with hers. Back at the manor, neither of them spoke. Not for a long time. Then, in the quiet of Vivian's chambers, Alyssa whispered, "Why did you never show me that painting?" Vivian looked at her. "Because I didn't want you to see yourself the way they did. But I'm not that girl anymore." "No," Vivian said. "You're the woman who walked into fire for me." Alyssa moved closer. "And you're the woman who taught me I was worth saving." They kissed again, this time slow, certain, the kind of kiss that carried no hesitation. That night, they didn't sleep apart. And in the darkness between them, the world felt distant, small, powerless. But the world hadn't finished trying. The next morning, a courier arrived with a letter sealed in gold. The Royal Council. A summons. Vivian read it in silence, then handed it to Alyssa. "You are hereby ordered to appear before the Royal Council to answer for conduct unbecoming of a Duchess. Your association with Miss Alyssa Ashford, as well as recent actions, must be addressed in full. Refusal to attend will result in formal charges and loss of title." Alyssa's voice was a whisper. They're trying to destroy you. Vivian met her gaze. Then let them try. But this time, I won't stand behind you. I'll stand with you. The royal council chamber was built for intimidation. Every inch of it, from the marble floor to the stained glass windows, radiated cold authority. Alyssa had never seen it before, but she recognized what it was the moment she stepped inside. Another kind of prison. Just grander. Louder. More polite in its cruelty. Vivian walked beside her in silence, dressed in deep charcoal velvet, her hair pulled back, her mouth set like a blade. Alyssa wore no jewelry, no paint on her face. Only herself. She had learned to be enough. At the far end of the chamber sat 7 men and women, draped in titles and old power. The room was full, silent, heavy with anticipation. Not for justice. For spectacle. The lead counselor, Lord Kavanaugh, rose. Duchess Cove, you've been summoned to account for your conduct, specifically, your relationship with Miss Alyssa Ashford, and the actions you have taken that may be deemed unbecoming of your title. What actions? Vivian asked, voice calm. Protecting someone from abuse? Refusing to let a corrupt woman trade lives for silence? Associating yourself romantically with an individual of inferior standing? She cut in, smiling coldly. There it is. A murmur rippled through the room. Kavanaugh frowned. Do you deny the nature of your relationship? Vivian's eyes didn't leave Alyssa's. No, gasps followed. Some seated nobles turned their faces. Others leaned in closer, like wolves scenting blood. Then you understand what's at stake, another counselor said. Your land, your title, your seat on the board of parliament. Take them, Vivian said. If they're the price for loving her, I don't want them. Alyssa's heart hammered in her chest. She stepped forward. And what about me? She asked the council. Am I to be judged for who I was? For being hidden? For surviving? Miss Ashford, Kavanaugh warned, you were not asked to speak, but I will, she said louder. Because I spent most of my life silent, locked away by a woman this council refused to investigate. And now, when someone powerful stands beside me, you want to punish her for it.
Not because of laws.
But because you hate what it represents. You hate that she didn't choose one of you. You hate that she chose me. The silence after that was longer. Sharper. Vivian touched her hand, just briefly, but it said everything. You were perfect. A woman from the corner of the chamber stood. Lady Belrose.
Feared.
Calculated. And strangely unreadable. May I speak? Kavanaugh hesitated. You may. Lady Belrose stepped forward, facing the council, then the room. I have known Duchess Cove for 20 years. She has broken hearts, yes. She has built empires and destroyed others. But she has never once been weak. And yet here she stands, willing to lose everything for love. That, she said slowly, is not unbecoming. That is strength. Another noble stood, then another. The tide shifted, quiet but undeniable. Kavanaugh looked down at the scroll in his hand. Let it be noted that while the council does not endorse the Duchess's actions, no formal charges will be pursued at this time. Her title remains intact. The matter is closed. The gavel hit. It echoed like thunder. But in Alyssa's heart, it sounded like the end of war. Hours later, back at Cove Manor, the staff welcomed them with quiet smiles. The halls that once felt like a fortress now felt like a sanctuary. A home. In the privacy of Vivian's chambers, Alyssa stood by the window, watching the light fall over the garden. Vivian came behind her, wrapping her arms around her waist. You were brilliant today, she whispered. You were brave. I learned from the best. They turned to face each other, their foreheads pressed together. I'm still afraid, Vivian admitted. So am I, Alyssa said. But I want this. So do I. Then no more waiting. No more hiding. Never again. The kiss they shared this time was not desperate or afraid. It was deep and soft and certain. It was everything they hadn't been allowed to want, now fully theirs. In the months that followed, the world did not forget. But it adapted. Some still whispered. Others pretended not to see. But the ones who mattered? They watched Vivian Cove and Alyssa Ashford walk through rooms hand in hand, and they said nothing. Because they understood. Love, when real, needs no permission. In time, Alyssa was not just Vivian's guest. She became her partner, her equal. She rebuilt herself with her own hands, using truth, not silence. And Vivian, who had once believed herself untouchable and alone, learned what it meant to be loved, not for her title, or her wealth, or her power, but for the quiet strength beneath it all. They danced again in that same ballroom one night, months after the trial. No guests, no music,
Just the two of them.
Alyssa leaned her head against Vivian's shoulder. "Do you still see her?" she asked softly. "Camille?" "Sometimes." "And what do you feel?" Vivian held her tighter. "Gratitude."
And peace.
"Because now I understand something I didn't then." "What?" "That loving once doesn't mean you cannot love again. It just means you know how to do it better." Alyssa closed her eyes. "Then let's do it right. You and me. Always." Outside, the wind moved through the trees, soft and full of memory. Inside, two women held each other, safe and free. Not hidden, not claimed, but chosen. Thank you so much for being here and for believing in this channel. If you feel in your heart, you can donate with super thanks so I can focus more and more on this project. Your support helps me keep creating these love stories and bringing them to life for you. See you in the next video.